flight time. Putting in the proper flight time. If you've read any of my books, taking any of my courses, regardless of which ones, when, you've heard me talk about flight time. You've heard me talk about the secret to rapid mastery is the flight time. Okay? And the concept of flight time is it comes from the concept of pilots, right? Pilots get good based on the amount of hours that they're in the air, plain and simple, right? And they put in the time. It also comes back to this 10,000 hours situation. But you got to put in the flight time. You got to put in time earned. And I always use the example. Actually, I got a lot of examples because I use immersion and I use flight time in everything that I do. So when I first started studying hypnosis, NLP, let me tell you how I got started in that, by the way, real quick. So I'm doing chi exercise, I'm doing meditations, and I'm realizing that the meditation is very similar to a self-hypnosis induction, right? It's really what it is. When you're going into a meditative state, you're going into a trance. And I started thinking, what about trance? What about hypnosis? I heard about it, but as I started investigating it, I realized how close it was to what I was already doing in the meditative state, in the Qigong and the power voice, the Qi power voice. And so I immersed myself in this concept of hypnotic influence. And so what I did was I hit it from every angle. Now, again, just like I did in the martial arts, though, I knew there were certain things that I wanted to learn, and there were certain things, aspects that I didn't really care about. So number one, that I didn't want to learn, I didn't want to learn really any therapeutic stuff. Didn't really want to get into that. Not that it was bad or anything like that, but I wanted to learn how to hypnotize with power covertly, which means I could do it on the fly anytime, anywhere. I didn't need to have a script. And so my whole concept was that. How am I going to get good enough that I could covertly hypnotize, influence, persuade? And I put an extreme amount of flight time. I was constantly listening to seminars. I was constantly watching videos, which is great. But let me tell you what I did also. Is I was constantly writing out scripts. I was constantly rehearsing. I was constantly trying different things when I would go out in public. Yeah, that's right. I was hypnotizing people in public. I was using these skills in public. And sometimes they worked and sometimes they didn't. But see, the fact of the matter is you've got to put in the flight time to know what's going on. And so you've got to, again, build systems for rapid learning. How to distill the learning into a systematic approach. And the way I did that was I knew what I wanted and I knew what I didn't want. So this was what I wanted, right? I said covert, influence. I wanted to learn that type of thing. Therapeutic things I wasn't as interested in, although I learned it later. I wasn't interested in stage hypnosis or anything like that either, so that was out, right? Although I understand it, right? And then steps, I would create steps for creating a personal system of accelerated learning. Everything, almost every book I wrote was for me. It wasn't for you. Now, you get the benefits of it, but it was for me to get better. Plain and simple. And I would read the book and I'd say, okay, that makes sense. And I would write my notes and I'd put it in there. And then it comes down to that practical application. Is how to apply flight time to any skill. Any skill you want to learn. You want to become good at programming. You've never done programming. You find a mentor, coach, methodology that you can use, a system, and you start learning how to do it. The only way you're going to learn is putting in a flight time. Plain and simple. That's how it works. You can accelerate your growth. You can accelerate your results by putting in more flight time. I heard it said that Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, guys like this, when the game was over, the practice was over, they're shooting extra shots. Nobody told them to do that, They were already at the top of their game. They were already probably the best in their game. And yet, they kept practicing their shots. Same thing with golfers that are excellent golfers. And yet, at the end of the game or the practice or the training, they hit more balls. They hit more balls. I was listening to a podcast. If you've ever heard of John Brown, he was Mr. Universe back in the 80s. Well, he has 3 boys, and I can't remember the names of all the boys, but he renamed them Saint Brown because he said there's a lot of Browns out there. I want them to be different, Saint Brown. And one of the Saint Brown boys is on the Detroit Lions. He's one of the top, most highest paid wide receivers or tight ends in the business. And they were interviewing John Brown, and they said, John, how did you train your kids to become such good athletes? And he said, number 1, I controlled their diet. I controlled also their thoughts by giving them affirmations. And he said, I also found how to get better by looking at the other people in the high school or in the college or wherever that were getting amazing results. And he used the example after a high school practice or a high school game. They played a team where one of the guys on the other team was fantastic, was a really good wide receiver. And he said to the father of this kid, hey, how'd your kid get so good? And the father said, well, we do 40 passes after every game. 40 passes. And he went back to his son, John Brown did, and said, we're going to do 100 passes after every game. We're going to get better and better and better and better. That's putting in flight time. This is how you get good at something. You can condense it. It doesn't have to be long. Now you can, if you can take your time to learn anything. But if you want rapid results, you put in the flight time and you put in a lot of it. When I first started doing the cheat training, I started out really small, and then I started to the point where I was doing 2 or 3 hours a day. Hour and a half in the morning, a little bit at lunch, another hour at night. I was immersed. I was putting in the flight time. And it's a key. It's a definite key that if you want to get the results, you put in the flight time.